does faith influence your lawmaking?
Well, absolutely. I mean, my faith influences every aspect of my life, whether it's my marriage or raising my kids, my business, and certainly being a lawmaker. My faith is the most important thing to me. I'm a Christian first and a public servant fourth. Christian first, then a husband and a dad, and then a public servant. And so it certainly influences every area of my life, including my role as a policymaker.
Speaking of policy, is there any issue or stance you've taken on a bill where you've turned to your faith for the answer?
Well, I try to look through the lens of my faith, my Christian biblical worldview on every issue I look at, whether it's a role of government, spending, criminal justice, certainly issues relating to the sanctity of life and the sanctity of marriage. It's impossible for me to look through an issue without looking at it through the lens of my faith. I believe that Scripture, the Christian faith, speaks to every issue we deal with in life, and that includes every bill we see here in the Capitol. So, in terms of specific issues, certainly the sanctity of life is an issue I think that's pretty black and white, and is one that I look to my faith for guidance on.
What do you say to somebody who, we hear mentions of God, not everybody in the 150-member body is Christian necessarily.
Sure.
What do you say to somebody who reaches a different conclusion than you based on their definition of God?
Well, that's the great thing about our democracy is 150 men and women from all across the state, different backgrounds, different stories, different faiths, and different districts come together for 140 days every 2 years, and we bring our experiences and our different backgrounds and different faiths, and we come together and try to affect policy for the state of Texas. So I welcome that. I welcome that diversity and the dialogue, the debate. That's why we're here. It's not a perfect system, but it does work. And so I've found that even when I'm dealing on an issue or debating or discussing an issue with someone who may disagree with me in terms of our faiths, we're able to find common ground on many, many issues here in the Capitol. And I think that speaks to the system that we've set up and the democratic form of government that we have.
You mentioned criminal punishment or criminal justice system. With like capital punishment, how does that factor in as far as support for that?
Well, the issue of capital punishment is one that certainly we take very seriously in our role as lawmakers. There are some crimes that are deserving of the ultimate penalty, but also, on the other hand, when you look at the criminal justice system and the role that our criminal justice system plays, where people can be restored and where people can be rejuvenated and become productive members of society again, we want to try to find a way to do that, where we can bring a victim of a crime and the perpetrator of a crime together so that the victim is made whole and the perpetrator is restored. We can do that. And I believe that the Christian faith is very clear when it comes to restoring people who can be restored, and the role of government in that is very clear. And so I take that as this is my second term to sit on the Criminal Jurisprudence Committee. I take that responsibility and that duty very seriously.
We hear God mentioned as well, especially this session, in reference to open carry and campus carry, just the right to bear arms. How does that factor in as saying that it's a God-given right, maybe citing segments of the Bible or whatnot, but how do the two go together?
Well, I do believe that the right to self-defense, the right to defend myself, protect my life and the life of my family is a God-given right. I don't believe that I should have to depend on the government to protect my family for me. That's a fundamental right that is not given by the government. It's to be protected by the government. And I take that very seriously. And the founders, if you go back and read the founding documents, what they believed, it's very clear to me that they too believed that God had given them the right to defend themselves, and I take the protection of that right very seriously. It's not one that's given by government; it's one that is to be protected by government.
Your
phone's ringing.
Yeah, sorry.
You're all right.
Your colleague in the House, Representative Simpson, has said, with relating to marijuana, that it's a plant that God made and which should be regulated just like tomatoes or coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree with him on that end as far as the decriminalization of that plant?
I disagree strongly with Representative Simpson and his bill that would essentially take Texas farther than any other state when it comes to legalizing marijuana. Representative Simpson is one of the most godly men I know here in the Capitol. It's one of the great blessings of getting to serve in this place, that I get to do life and do legislation with people like him. But we disagree on this issue. I think very strongly that we ought to look at the role of government in decrim efforts, but his bill takes us much farther than that. It's full-scale legalization, and I believe that that it goes way too far. And that's why I worked hard to kill the legislation, and I ultimately voted against it in committee.
Does that speak to just kind of the interpretations of faith as far as looking at one issue like that?
It certainly is an issue of role of government. What is certainly, God, I agree with Representative Simpson that God is the creator of all things, but God is also the creator of government. And so as our role as lawmakers, civil government has a place to regulate certain things. And I think it would be a mistake to just assume that the government ought to take our hands off altogether when it comes to a drug that's very dangerous, a drug that is proven to destroy lives. It's a gateway drug. The majority of law enforcement across the state, vast majority, in fact, maybe all of them, came out against Representative Simpson's bill. And importantly, faith leaders from across the state came out in strong opposition to Representative Simpson's bill as well. So, it's an interesting issue. It's one that I think certainly deserves debate, but it's pretty black and white for me.
You do hear God mentioned a lot here in the Capitol, and people watching the feed from home, would they say, what about separation of church and state? What would you say to that as far as just the amount of, mention and whatnot?
Sure. Well, I too believe in the separation of church and state, but I do not believe in the separation of God and country. And the separation of church and state is often misinterpreted. It's meant to protect the church. It's meant to protect the church from intrusion by the state, not the other way around. I do not believe that the freedom of religion means the freedom from religion. If you go back and look at the founding of our nation and the founding of our state, Judeo-Christian principles, the belief in God, the belief that He has a plan for America, a plan for the state of Texas was central and was a core principle of our founders. And I think that we, as protectors of the Constitution, not only for the people who are here now, but for generations of Americans, generations of Texans to come, we have a duty to protect that. And so I do not believe, and I work strongly against those who claim that we need to completely separate God from government. I strongly disagree with that.
You were in support of Representative's religious freedom bill that never made it past that deadline?
Which one?
The 4105?
Representative Bell's.
Bell's,
yes.
Yes. With same-sex marriage, and you could look at it and it's a union of love and commitment.
Sure.
Yet it's same gender roles.
Yeah, so my position on this issue is very clear. I've always been clear that I think this is an issue that's left to the states. One of the big issues that we're dealing with, no matter what side of the political spectrum or these divisive issues you find yourself on, I think we should all be alarmed at the growing intrusion of the federal government into issues that the federal government should not be involved in. And marriage is one of those, in my opinion. And so no matter what the Supreme Court of the United States says this summer, I think we all assume we know what the holding is going to say. But I believe very strongly that this is a states' rights issue, that the federal government said in the Constitution in the 10th Amendment that if the power has not been specifically enumerated and given to the federal government, then it's a power retained by the state. And so whether you're a Christian or not, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, this is an issue that I believe the states should deal with, and I've always been very clear on that.
So you don't maybe look to the Bible and how marriage is defined there? You see it as a state's right? Oh, no. I mean, I don't get me wrong. The Scripture is very clear, and the role of marriage is not created by government. Marriage is a union that's created by God. I believe very strongly in that. And
And so, and the family is as well. I think the marriage between one man and a woman is core to the institution of the family, which is the first institution that God created, not government, not even the church, but the family. And so I think we have an obligation to protect that. But from a constitutional perspective, the Constitution is clear that this is something that the federal government shouldn't necessarily be dealing with. It should be a power that's left to the states. And by the way, the people of Texas have spoken on this issue. And the Constitution says that marriage is to be between one man and one woman. And that's really what Representative Bell's legislation would have done, is just to cement that, to reaffirm our commitment to marriages between one man and a woman, at least in the state of Texas.
Representative Leach, thank you so much.
Thank you.